Imagine being a soldier in the American Army in 1780. You are cold, hungry, and exhausted. Your clothes are worn out, your shoes are falling apart, and some of the men around you have not eaten properly in days. Others are sick, and some have simply left because they no longer believe the army can win. Now look across the field. The enemy has better weapons, better supplies, more experienced soldiers, and a much stronger army. This was the situation facing the Americans during the Revolutionary War. After 5 years of fighting, things were getting worse. The British controlled important cities in the south, including Charleston and Savannah, and American forces had suffered several major defeats. The army was struggling to survive, and British forces were pushing deeper into the Carolinas. Then George Washington made a decision that would change the Southern campaign. He sent a new commander to take control of the American army in the South. His name was Nathaniel Greene. Greene was not the kind of man most people would expect to become a great general. He was born in Rhode Island in 1742 and grew up in a Quaker family. Quakers were known for their peaceful beliefs, but Greene became deeply interested in military history when he was young. He read books about war, strategy, and famous commanders, and spent years teaching himself about military leadership. He also walked with a limp and had very little military experience when the revolution began, but he had a sharp mind, strong discipline, and a natural ability to lead. When the fighting started in 1775, Greene joined the local militia as a private. He started at the lowest level, but his abilities quickly became clear. He moved up through the ranks and eventually became a major general in the Continental Army. George Washington noticed him and came to trust him. That trust became even more important in 1778, when Greene was given a job that most people would probably consider boring. He became the Quartermaster General of the Continental Army. It was not a battlefield position. He was not leading soldiers into dramatic attacks. His job was to help make sure the army had food, clothing, weapons, horses, and other supplies. But the American army badly needed that kind of leadership. Soldiers cannot fight without food. They cannot march without clothing and equipment. An army can have brave men and great commanders, but if it cannot supply those men, it will eventually fall apart. Greene understood that. He worked to improve the supply system and helped keep Washington's army operating during one of the hardest periods of the war. Then, in 1780, Greene was sent south. What he found was not a powerful army ready to attack. It was an army struggling to stay alive. The British had already won major victories in the south. Charleston had fallen, and American forces had suffered a crushing defeat at Camden. British troops seemed to have the advantage everywhere. Greene knew he could not simply gather his entire army and fight the British in one huge battle. If that battle ended badly, the American army could be destroyed. So Greene chose a different strategy. He divided his forces into smaller groups. One of those groups was placed under Nathaniel Morgan, an experienced fighter who knew how to use the land and understood how British troops liked to attack. Greene's plan was not about winning one giant battle, it was about keeping the American army alive. If the British could not destroy the American army, they could not finish the war in the south. And if they had to keep chasing smaller American forces across a huge area, they would have to spread out, more supplies, and protect more territory. Greene was making the British fight a war they did not want to fight. Then came Cowpens. In January 1781, British troops under Lieutenant Colonel Banastra Tarleton moved against Nathaniel Morgan's force in South Carolina. Tarleton expected an aggressive attack and believed the Americans were vulnerable. Morgan had other plans. He placed his troops in a way that encouraged the British to keep moving forward. American soldiers fired, pulled back, and made the British believe they were losing control of the battlefield. But the retreat was not a complete collapse. It was part of the plan. The British pushed forward with confidence, and then the Americans turned and attacked. The British line began to break. The Battle of Cowpens became a major American victory, and it was exactly the kind of result Greene needed. The Americans had destroyed a significant British force while keeping their own army alive. But Cornwallis, the senior British commander in the region, was not going to let that happen again. He wanted to find Greene and destroy his army, so he chased him. For weeks, British and American forces moved through the Carolinas. Cornwallis kept trying to force Greene into a major battle, but Greene kept moving. To some people, it looked like Greene was running away, but Greene understood something very simple. If his army was destroyed, the war in the south could be lost, so he would rather retreat and fight another day than risk everything in one battle. Eventually, Greene's army reached the Dan River. Cornwallis was close behind. The Americans needed to cross the river before the British caught them. They made it across just in time. When Cornwallis arrived, Greene's army was already on the other side. The British had missed their chance. Greene had escaped again. But this time, Greene did something unexpected. He came back. After retreating and rebuilding his forces, Greene decided to face Cornwallis at Guilford Courthouse in March 1781. The battle was fierce. American and British troops fought across fields and wooded areas, and both sides suffered heavy losses. By the end of the battle, the British had forced Greene's army from the field. Technically, Cornwallis had won, but there was a problem. The British had paid a very high price for that victory. They had lost hundreds of experienced soldiers, and those men were difficult to replace. Greene's army, meanwhile, was still alive, and that was becoming the most important part of the campaign. Greene continued to fight across the south. His army faced the British at places like Hobkirk's Hill, 96, and Eutaw Springs. He did not suddenly start winning every battle. That was never the point. Greene was trying to make the British position harder and harder to maintain. Every British soldier lost mattered. Every supply shipment became more important. Every mile of territory required more men to protect. The British could win a battle and still find themselves in a worse position afterward. That was Greene's strategy. He was not trying to destroy the British army in one day. He was slowly wearing it down. And the longer the campaign continued, the harder it became for Britain to control the south. Eventually, Cornwallis moved his army north into Virginia. That decision would lead him toward Yorktown. In the fall of 1781, American and French forces surrounded Cornwallis's army at Yorktown. The British were trapped, and their position became impossible to defend. On October 19, 1781, Cornwallis surrendered. The Revolutionary War did not officially end that day, but Yorktown changed the course of the conflict. Britain no longer had the same will to continue the war, and peace negotiations followed. America was on its way to independence. Nathaniel Greene had played an important role in making that possible. But Greene's story did not end with a parade or a life of comfort. During the war, he had spent much of his own money trying to support his soldiers and keep the army supplied. After the war, he was left deeply in debt. Then, in 1786, Nathaniel Greene died at only 43 years old. He did not live long enough to enjoy the country he had helped fight for. And over time, his name became less famous than Washington, Jefferson, or other major figures of the Revolution. But his contribution was something different. Greene understood that you do not always have to win every battle to achieve your goal. Sometimes the most important thing is keeping your army alive. Sometimes retreat is not failure. Sometimes a victory on paper can actually weaken the side that won it, and sometimes the best strategy is simply to keep going when the other side expects you to disappear. Nathaniel Greene could not match the British in numbers, supplies, or equipment, so he changed the way he fought. He avoided the kind of battle that could destroy his army. He kept his forces moving. He forced the British to spend men and supplies chasing him. And little by little, the British position in the south became weaker. Greene did not win every fight. He did something more important. He stayed in the fight long enough to help change the outcome of the war. That is what makes Nathaniel Greene's story so unusual. He was the general who could lose a battle without losing the campaign. The commander who understood that survival could be part of a larger strategy. And the man who helped turn a desperate situation in the south into one of the most important campaigns of the American Revolution. Nathaniel Greene was not the general who won every battle. He was the general who understood which battles mattered. And in the end, that helped him do something far more important than winning a single battlefield. He helped win the war.